I'm wondering, what do you think the relationship is like with community versus being in tune with self, right?
Mm-hmm. I think through community, we learn to know ourselves. I think that we only can come to find spirituality when we find community, because you can choose to live a hermetic life. You can go off into the mountains and live and say, well, you're getting closer to God. But and again, I'm not taking that journey away from anyone, but in truth, I think you really see God reflected in other people and in their brokenness. And that reminds us of our own brokenness, our own shortcomings, our own pain. Mm-hmm. And coming out of the pandemic, I mean, I was talking to a journalist last week who lost 22 family members. Wow. Man, 22.
Wow. That's hard.
So when are we going to start to really grieve? Because I don't think we've totally given ourselves the opportunity to grieve.
No.
Okay, so just take the Vietnam War, for instance. We lost 58,000 Americans that we know of, a million Vietnamese, but certainly 58,000 servicemen that we know were KIA. We lost 1.2 million Americans after the pandemic. When are we going to grieve? Mm-hmm. Abraham Lincoln he insisted that the nation grieve after the Civil War to allow us to get past it. The Vietnam War, we didn't. It was like, we didn't win that war, so we're not. No, man, no. It's so we didn't allow ourselves the grieving. We're not allowing ourselves the grieving after pandemic, and there will be hell to pay unless we do.
What's up, world? It's your boy, Mike Muse. Welcome to the Conversation, the Mike Muse Show. I am so excited to be in conversation with my next guest, Emilio Estevez. He is a very accomplished actor, somebody who I've had the chance to meet only by way of the television and the film screen, but I always think that he is like the coolest cat in the room. And so it is an honor to welcome right now to the Mike Muse Show. What's happening, man?
Mike.
Yo, you look great.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, man.
So I'm excited because you're here to talk about, obviously, the movie The Way, but audience, I love energy, and I create my own energy. Like, I always do dance parties by myself in my apartment, at my home. Like, right? Music is like a way of life for me. And every time I have the chance before guests come in, I like to set the energy with music. And the song I was playing before you came in was called Castle on the Hill by Ed Sheeran. And it's just something that just always moved me. I play it at least 3 times per week. It centers me. It makes me feel really good. And when I was thinking about this movie, The Way, about a pilgrimage and a journey for self, I was like, I think that's just a perfect compliment for me to set this energy. How do you set your energy in the morning? Is it music? Like, what do you rock out to?
Generally, it starts with coffee.
Okay.
A lot of it.
Yeah.
And I like to get up with the sun. So I'm up. I'm an early riser. I like to watch the sun. I like to sort of get that edge, and watch the city wake up. That inspires me.
Wow.
And I feel like I kind of like, all right, I made it another day. I saw another sunrise.
I love that. You're one of those that I aspire to be. I could never get up that early to watch the sunrise.
Right.
Okay. Do you take a coffee black, cream, sugar,
with
milk?
Everything. I put honey in it. I put whole milk in it. I love my coffee.
Oh, you do the works.
Oh, the whole thing.
See, I just take mine black. Mine is always a venti iced coffee, black from Starbucks. My thing is just inject the caffeine right into my veins and into my bloodstream. Okay, but you didn't say music yet. Do you listen to music in the morning, or how do you set the tone?
Yeah, I'll put some music on. My girlfriend Jack she's kind of the maestro behind the putting the playlist together.
Okay.
So she'll put it together and put it on in the mornings, and we'll start our day that way as well.
I love that. I have almost a different playlist almost for every day, and then the times, right? But on Sunday mornings, it's nothing but classical music.
Okay.
So my dream is always to wake up in the morning, coffee on a Sunday, play some classical music, and physically read the New York Times.
Right. Okay.
So if I'm able to do that on Sundays, I have achieved the goal for myself per week.
We have the Sinatra Sundays, and we definitely tuck into Sinatra and a lot of oldies.
Yeah.
A lot of vintage stuff, and that's I credit Jackie.
Yeah.
Who's here?
Yeah. I didn't want to look at her, but I was like, I think this is Jackie that he's talking about. I had the chance to meet her audience. She has pleasant and wonderful energy. That is awesome. Sinatra was the soundtrack of my holidays. He's a good holiday soundtrack.
Indeed.
Yeah. Jackie is nodding to agreement with that was a good holiday soundtrack.
Didn't want to make her blush, but look at that.
Now, listen, the way is about like this pilgrimage that takes place over in Europe that's 68 miles long, called the Santiago de Compostela, that takes place in Spain. This was released a number of years ago.
That's right.
But during the pandemic, it really caught fire, and now you guys are re-releasing it.
That's right.
It's about this spiritual journey that one can take and kind of finding self. We're obviously going to get into the movie, obviously, but I'm just curious for you yourself. Did you have a reset during the pandemic that made you want to re-release this moment yourself?
Well, interestingly enough, the film was sort of languishing in Nowhereville. It got a cult following when it was initially released in 2012 or 2011, and then in 2012, it was on the streaming platforms, and it was on DVDs were selling really well, especially in the faith-based community. Faith-based would buy like 50 copies and give them out as gifts. But then the DVD started to disappear. It started coming down off platforms, streaming platforms. And then it was like the feedback that I was getting is, we can't find your movie. Where's this movie? And it ended up being in movie jail, which is what I like to call it. It was wrapped up in a motion to abandon rights courtroom in Delaware. Oftentimes movie libraries will transfer from one company to another. This particular company had gone bankrupt. And so there was no way for me to figure out how to rescue this film until this boutique distribution company approached me and said, I can help you rescue your movie. So we did. And we got it out. And then we were just with the idea of maybe putting it back out on the platforms and just stream platforms, let people see it again. But then Fathom Events stepped in and they said, we'd like to put this back out in theaters. And we'd like to give you, a 1,000 screen release nationwide. I was like, okay, that's a lot more than we had ever intended. And it's certainly more screens than the movie was released on when it was initially released. So it was like, okay, let's do this. But that also requires a lot of footwork and a lot of traveling and a lot of getting the word out. We joined forces with, speaking of Jackie again,
hey,
Jackie,
you are like my unofficial co-host for this conversation.
She came up with this crazy idea with Fathom, re-releasing it. How about we bring in Rick Steves, the travel icon, as a partner?
Ooh.
So
I see you, Jackie.
So we write his generic email, thinking, okay, it's like hit. I wrote to Rick, hey, we're doing this thing, and hit send. And okay, let's just go have another beer because we're never going to hear from him. Yeah. Rick Steves calls the next day, and he's just like, I would love to be a part of this. Let's keep talking. So we took a train up to Edmonds, Washington, where Rick lives, and we shot this extra added bonus footage. And it's like a conversation between Martin, my father, and Rick, talking about travel and culture and spirituality and why we travel and the road is church and why pilgrimage is so important, because it's all about, really, it's not necessarily, and the journey, it's a 500-mile journey. It starts in Saint Jean Pied de Port and goes all the way to Santiago de Compostela across the north of Spain. So, and it takes about 40 days to do, more or less. Some people do it in 30, but you're moving. But generally about 40 days. So now, our conversation, which is an addendum to the movie, is really about why it's important to travel and why pilgrimage is important and why even a pilgrimage next door to see how your neighbor's doing. Pilgrimage doesn't have to be going to Spain. It doesn't have to be, getting on a plane and going somewhere. It could be a walk around Central Park. It could be a walk to the mailbox, depending on, what your abilities are.
But why though? Why are you centering on pilgrimage? Like, why do you think it's important?
It's about community.
Individual? Okay.
It's about finding community. And I think we find community on pilgrimage because oftentimes the people that you meet along your journey, whether it's an actual pilgrimage or whether your life journey, the ones that you don't necessarily want to spend the time with are the ones that will teach you your greatest lessons. And that's what Tom, the character Martin, plays in the film. He finds these people who he doesn't want to be around, right? He's like kind of this, conservative country club golf playing guy, unlike Martin Sheen, of course, and he doesn't want to have anything to do with these guys and gal that he picks up along the way. But he becomes himself along the journey. He finds out who the hell he is, and he becomes the son that he could never identify with while the son was alive.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really interesting about the journey, right? And the reason I kind of leaned into, did you have any revelations during the pandemic? And you don't have to share, but for me, my audience, the reason I found connectivity to this film is because, life was just happening at such a fast pace as it was for everyone. And I had the chance to really sit with self. And then in sitting with self, I began to realize and shed all these extra layers that kind of got added on by societal norms and pressures and things are supposed to be. And I really got in tune with myself. And then really get in tune with myself, I really redeveloped a new relationship with God and spirituality. Mm-hmm. And so I became completely less religious and leaned into spirituality to the point where so we were a little bit joking a little bit earlier about music, but for me, it's really about setting my intentions and setting the energy that I want for the day, right? And so not only do I do the coffee with the music, but then I also too have some type of aromatherapy, right? So I'm really big on scents, right? So I'll either burn a candle or some sage or some Palo Santos, and to really set it, if I can play with the lighting, if I can, that's even more important to me. Right. But it's really about in tune to self. And so I'm wondering, what do you think the relationship is like with community versus being in tune with self, right?
Mm-hmm. I think through community, we learn to know ourselves. I think that we only can come to find spirituality when we find community, because you can choose to live a hermetic life. You can go off into the mountains and live and say, well, you're getting closer to God. But and again, I'm not taking that journey away from anyone, but in truth, I think you really see God reflected in other people and in their brokenness. And that reminds us of our own brokenness, our own shortcomings, our own pain. Mm-hmm. And coming out of the pandemic, I was talking to a journalist last week who lost 22 family members. Wow. Man, 22.
Wow. That's hard.
So when are we going to start to really grieve? Because I don't think we've totally given ourselves the opportunity to grieve. No. Okay, so just take the Vietnam War, for instance. We lost 58,000 Americans that we know of, a million Vietnamese, but certainly 58,000 servicemen that we know were KIA. We lost 1.2 million Americans after the pandemic. When are we going to grieve? Mm-hmm. Abraham Lincoln he insisted that the nation grieve after the Civil War to allow us to get past it. The Vietnam War, we didn't. It was like, we didn't win that war, so we're not. No, man, no. It's so we didn't allow ourselves the grieving. We're not allowing ourselves the grieving after pandemic, and there will be hell to pay unless we do.
It's funny you're mentioning that. I think I've had different reflective moments of grief and an evolution of what actually occurred during those, let's just say 2 years, really 3, but let's just say 2 years. We had this incredible moment of this global health pandemic. And then we had this incredible moment of racial reckoning. Mm-hmm. And then we had this incredible moment of redefining our democracy, and not to go into details, right? Mm-hmm. So it's just this trifecta of this moment that happened in 2 years. And I have been saying recently a lot that I don't think we've ever allowed that to really set in.
We have not.
And what that meant.
We have not.
I remember I was in D.C. for the White House Correspondents' Dinner a couple of weeks ago, and I was looking and I was passing by the Hayes Adams, and right there they had Black Lives Matter Plaza. And I just thought about, oh my God, what did we have to go through as a nation in order for that moment to happen? Mm-hmm. Because that wouldn't have happened if not for what we went through. And it just reminded me of the gravity of what we were all experiencing. But to your point, airplanes are over capacity. Right. The travel industry is just booming right now. Restaurants are busting at the seams. And so not only did we get back to normal, but we got back to more than normal.
That's right.
And
that's right.
It's almost like this PTSD that we haven't addressed. And so I've been thinking about, the world needs a saging moment.
Yes, without question.
Right? I've really been thinking about that a lot. It's funny you picked that up.
Well, and we're seeing that behavior manifest in the most horrible incidences across the world, but certainly across our country.
The intervals of these incredible incidents that we're talking about here right now, we used to see it maybe once a year.
That's right.
Now we're seeing it once a week, sometimes multiple times a week, and even a couple times a weekend.
That's right.
Right? And now, Emilio, we become so numb that even when it hits our timeline or we hear about it, it's almost as a shoulder shrug. Like, Yeah. And then we go on about our day. And to your point, that is not normal.
That is not normal. No. And I wrote directed a film called Bobby, which is about the day Bobby Kennedy was shot. It was released almost 17 years ago. But in the film, I used the speech it was voiced over the shooting at the Ambassador Hotel. And he talks about the mindless menace of violence in America. Yeah. And it was 2 days after the death of Dr. King. And the speech is so powerful. It's so resonant to where and relevant to where we are today. And yet we've learned nothing.
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
But I think that's why it's important. So you're getting to know me. This is our first time meeting, audience. But my what I do is I intersect politics and pop culture, and so I peel back the social constructs and get people to see policy through sports, music, film, fashion, and technology, but really social constructs. And that's why I'm obsessed with like film and TV and art, because it holds a mirror up to society.
That's right.
And makes us question.
That's right.
Who we are. So
this is what you look like. I don't like it.
Yeah, but it goes back to you were saying you find God in broken people.
Yes.
Right? Which is just another mirror.
That's my mission. I mean, if you look at the movies that I've written and directed, Bobby, The Public, The Way, it is all about a shared humanity. It is they're all connected. If you want to know how I see the world, look at those movies. That's how I see our interacted. That's how I see how we interact. That's how I see the planet. That's how I see our communities.
How did you come to this Constitution? To be so grounded.
I think travel had so much to do with it.
You're not perfect. I'm not perfect.
No,
but
gosh,
just to attempt to be grounded.
I think travel had a lot to do with it. I think that the fact that my parents insisted that we travel with them, that we get outside of ourselves. When we left New York in 1969, New York was really it was all I knew. I never wanted to leave New York. We left New York. We moved to Mexico. My dad was cast in Catch-22. We dug in there. We lived there for 4 months. So it was immersive travel. The next big job that he got, after Mexico, we moved to California and dug in there. But the next job he got the big one was we went to Rome. We rented an apartment in Rome and lived there for 3 months. Beautiful city, but you're there for 3 months and you're taken out of school and you have to, try to figure out a new language and on and on. Then the Philippines, 6 months in the Philippines. And they were all immersive travel experiences, all for work, but I was constantly uprooted and constantly sort of deposited in a new environment with new people, with new communities. And I think that really informed and everything that I am today. I think, how could it not? Right. It's when you learn to know yourself when you travel. When we are 5% of the world's population, we eat up 60% of the world's resources. The other 95%, unless you travel, unless you get outside of yourself, you don't know how the rest of the world lives. And I would argue that you don't necessarily have to go to Spain, because not everybody can either afford the time to take the pilgrimage on this Camino de Santiago. It's a commitment. Get in your car and drive. I've got a 2006 Lexus. It's got 320,000 miles on it.
I love that.
I drive everywhere. I drive all across it, and I dig in, and I meet people that I don't agree with, that I may disagree with fundamentally on every issue, but we still find a moment to break bread and have a conversation without judgment.
Yeah.
And then move on. But I think you only get that when you travel, when you get outside of yourself and your comfort zone.
It's interesting that you have brought that lens and POV of travel into it, in particular in the early part of our conversation when you talk about finding God in others and in their brokenness. I think sometimes we romanticize travel, right?
We do.
And especially those in America. And
it's
yes,
leisure,
audience, I did the eye roll as I said that, right?
Right.
And we get on like, oh my God, Europe is so beautiful. You gotta just love Paris. Like all this frivolous things.
Right.
I'm not knocking it. Like however you choose to travel and what you see is whatever. But what I love about what you just mentioned, and this is how I feel about travel, right? And is that you can see the humanity in others, because if you're honest with yourself, and particularly when you land in foreign places, and if you may be traveling by yourself or maybe with one other person, when you land, for me, I get this emotion of adrenaline, right? In particular, because I don't speak multiple languages because I'm American, right?
It's that old joke.
I'm only fluent in English,
joke,
right? And barely that sometimes, right? And so every time I
it's true.
land somewhere in a country, I don't know the language. So and this is before Google Translator, right? Which is a help now, but just like, I don't know the language. I don't know the signs. Where do I go when I get out of the airport? Do I exchange money before or after? Damn, I should have went to my bank before I left.
Right.
Now what do I do? Oh my God, now the taxis, right? Which is a nightmare. And thinking about JFK taxis and LGA, the yellow versus those who hawking you on the side. And you're like, well, what are the rules here?
Right.
Like, what do they do?
Right.
And I remember I went to Colombia by myself. And when I landed in Cartagena, I mean, that was just, the airport was a movie unto itself.
Right.
And I'm by myself.
Right.
And I get in the car with this gentleman. I don't even know if it's safe. I don't speak Spanish. I've heard all the horror stories.
Of course.
So my adrenaline is going. Like, my sweat glands are going.
Right.
And Emilio, he didn't help because he pulled out a book and he was really like, which girl do you want? I was like, sir. You know what I mean? And then from there, it just snowballed into areas I don't want to take this conversation in.
Right.
And then I literally get to my Airbnb, but here's the humanity part. I get to the Airbnb, don't speak Spanish, and it's like this condo space. And they didn't have my reservation. They don't speak English. I don't speak Spanish. This man who is very into some crazy things, cab driver, has left, right?
Right. So you're standing there with your bags.
Freaking out. What's happening? No Wi-Fi.
Right.
And when I talk about finding humanity in God and people, this lady walked down and she saw I was frazzled and she spoke English and she helped facilitate, right? In that moment, I began to calm down. I began to settle and I began to thank her. And I was able to check in. But that for me is what builds your constitution, right? Is when you travel, like the adrenaline, the emotion, the rush, the excitement, the fear, right? And then finding solace and solitude and grace in humans.
It's all about grace.
And so let you know that humans are okay. They're not as bad as you think.
Or what you've read or what the media pushes or what any of that. You know, don't go to New York. Someone's going to push you in the subway.
Yeah.
No, they're not. They're just, go to New York, go to Spain, go to Colombia, get outside of yourself, meet other people, and risk looking foolish because so much of it, and thanks to social media, it's like, we all want to look cool. We all want to wear the good, and so if you can get past, and I'm guilty of it too. I want to look cool.
Of course, same here. Yeah, I specifically picked this sweatshirt because of color. I know somebody in the studio.
Right.
Don't judge me.
but if you could get past that wanting to look cool and willing to make a fool of yourself, because you will. You're going to say the wrong word. You're going to say, ask for the baño or the bathroom and say the wrong thing for baño. It's going to happen. Yeah. You have to risk that.
But also, too, think in those moments, I mean, I think there's also, too, a thread here of spirituality, which is a thread of the film, is that no matter what your belief is, whether, like, you're atheist, whatever your thing is, there is a moment where you do call upon a God. Like in a moment of fear, right? Whether it's turbulence, right? Of course. Whether you get down to a shady area, like you just say something. And so I think also too, travel does allow you to at least think about something bigger than yourself.
That's right.
Right? Whether you start doing your rosary beads or you start doing your Buddha chant, whatever. But it does tie you to spirituality.
You must have flown with my father.
Sounds like maybe. I get real spiritual on the airplane.
Man,
I get so
the
quick.
rosary beads come out, and then there's one, and there's one for the passenger. He walks another one up to the pilot, gives a couple out to the stewardess or the flight attendant. It's like, dude, where are you getting all these rosaries? It's like, you never know.
Homie, all the heathen things I did the day before that I get to the airport, I'm the most saintly of human beings that are out there. And I mean, pleasant. Before we wrap, I can't keep you are a fascinating conversation. I'm thoroughly enjoying this moment. I'm just curious, when you guys were making this, I'm curious when either art, film, TV, sports has a fan base, finds its fan base, right? And finds its audience. And sometimes I think sometimes I love when the unexpected. Did you guys expect after you concluded this movie that the faith-based organizations and entities would latch on the way that it did? Because although it is a spiritual pilgrimage journey, it's not overly religious.
It is not overly religious. In fact, we thought that the Catholics would embrace it. It's taken them a minute to come to that realization that this is This is not an anti-Catholic movie. This is a pro-life movie in the greatest sense of pro-life, because it's about human interaction. It's about human beings. It is. There is a theme throughout where Martin's character is scattering the ashes of his deceased son. That's anti-canon law. So the Catholics are like, well, and there's a mention about an abortion. And so, well, it's like, well, but we address it and we deal with it, and we pay homage to all of spiritual pilgrimage, whether it's to Rome, to Jerusalem, to the Hajj. This is something that is I think inherent in our. We get what's our first instinct? Yeah. To get up as babies, stop crawling, get up and put one foot in front of the other. It is our natural instinct to walk and to see what is out there. So that is I think what drives us. Exploration. Now we want to go to Mars. Well, wait a minute, we had enough problems on this planet we still need to solve, and we still haven't figured out the brain. Right? Shouldn't that be the next great frontier? Getting to what's happening in the brain and dealing with mental illness, and maybe we'll stop some of these shootings, because it's not just access to guns, but it is mental illness. Yeah. So let's have the next frontier not be Mars. Let's have some of these billionaires start spending money on research to find out what makes us tick. Because what is it, 10% of our brains that we use? Come on, man. Yeah. Come on.
Oh, yeah.
Let's figure out this enormous space that occupies our computer that's sitting on the top of our shoulders, our nagandaz. Let's figure out what's in the gooey center of our nagandaz, man.
I couldn't think of a better way to end. We're just going to end right there, Emilio. Those are incredible last words for this conversation. You are a joy and a treat, and I hope you come back to the Mike Muse Show sometime again so we can keep unpacking things. Indeed. I think there's a lot more to you.
Dude, I got so much. I got a lot of luggage.
I think there's a lot to be unreleased.
There's some beautiful things inside that luggage, but there's also a lot of junk.
Yeah.
And we gotta
know you're in a safe space to go there. And the next time you come back, man, this has been a treat. Ladies and gentlemen, please make sure you go check out The Way May 16th. How can people find it?
So if you go to Fathom Events, they have a website that's connected to the film. You can also go to thewaythemovie.com. And if you miss the screening on Tuesday night, you can go to the website, thewaythemovie.com, and find out where you can have the in-home theater experience to see the film after that.
I love that. You heard the audience do all the things that he just said. Until next time, peace.